Alright, so this is my review of Medicos Speedwagon. And it's a recent release. And if you're into JoJo's Bizarre Adventures and you really like Phantom Blood, like Phantom Blood's my favorite arc personally, this is definitely one you don't want to miss. So Speedwagon's a very well-liked character, and probably my favorite character in the series after Jonathan. So let's get right into the review. I got him on Hobby Link Japan for 70 bucks. Okay, so let's talk about his aesthetics, and we'll talk about the stand in a second. So looks very clean, and Medicos usually does a good job with just overall like paint detail and things like that, so no real surprise there. One second. All right, so yeah, very clean face details. They did a really nice job with his scar, details on his hat, all look very clean. Paint's very nice, shading everywhere. On the purple, you see all the variations. His tie, again, Medicos really does know how to paint their figures well. And no exception here. Buttons all painted, no bleeding here, very common to see like kind of like those detailed parts just kind of bleed. Not the case with Medico. Yeah, so he looks good. Very nice satin finish everywhere on his shoes, jacket. Looks really nice. So they did a good job with him there. Now, I will say that, and this is really just me nitpicking, Speedwagon doesn't really look like this in the anime, and that's not really a fair thing to complain about. I would prefer that they went with the anime look, because I feel like he looks so much more badass in the anime. But they were really going with the kind of like the manga look when they made this figure. So, and I think that's generally what Medicos does. In the anime, he definitely looks a little bit more hulked out, which is kind of like the thing. Like if you look at the Pillar Men in the anime versus what they look like in the manga, huge difference. And yeah, we'll talk about, there's some issues with him. Like you can notice that I'm struggling getting him to stand. We're going to get to that in a second. So actually, I'm just going to use this to kind of keep him stable for now. But aesthetics, I will give him, I think I'll give him a 4.2. Only because he's a little too scrawny looking for my liking. With Medicos, like kind of like their aesthetic is they really pinch in like the hips, like the legs and things like that. Like here, very kind of narrow there. Arms kind of have like, and it's like an aesthetic, right, with Medicos, which is kind of being true to the manga. And like I said, my reviews are going to be subjective. This is based on what I'm kind of just feeling with this figure. I'm just crazy about the anime. I would have liked him to be a little bit more squared up, kind of more beefy looking like he did in the anime. But 4.2 because he still looks great. Okay, so let's talk about his articulation, and this is where we start running into some serious problems with this figure. Okay, so the head is on a very old-fashioned kind of crappy joint. Let me just get his head up so you can see. So this is what his head is on. And that's just kind of disappointing. Like, for a figure that's supposed to be like in a premium category, why are we still using kind of like these antiquated kind of like swivel joints and hinges and things like that? They should have just been a double ball peg. That would have been so much nicer. And it's like, this might have been okay like back in like 2010, 2015. But, Medicos has to get with the times. Like, they didn't update the articulation on this figure. So you just get this very tiny, pathetic ball joint, which gives his head almost no movement whatsoever. Even worse with kind of like the fact that his hair is so, wow, okay, that just happened. That sucks. All right, so I'm going to keep this in the review. His little plume here just broke. And I nudged it. I just nudged that. Okay, so there you go. That just happened here. I'll super glue that in later. Let me find a safe place to put that. Okay, so let's continue. So that's kind of made more kind of like terrible by the fact that his hair is just, it's just like a brick. And it barely moves. It just sits there like some lump of plastic. Like there's no movement that you could get out of that. So when you put all that together, very unpleasant. So the head movement's just not there. Like you just get the bobblehead articulation. Okay, moving on. His arms do come out nicely. Okay, so they do come out nicely. And you do get a kind of double ball joint in there. So you do get a nice butterfly joint and things like that. And double joint on the elbows, you can't even use it. There is a double joint there because his shirt sleeve just completely bricks that off. They could have found a way to get around that. So a 90-degree bend on a figure like this is unacceptable. So that's terrible. You get very kind of crappy ball swivels, and these are so loose. Look, like very crappy kind of ball swivels. Now, Medicos figures, like I said, they look good, but they sometimes just have terrible QC issues. And that's the case with this. And that's very disappointing because this is one of their newer releases. Yeah, just ball swivels everywhere and no real innovation. So very disappointing there. Okay, but let's continue. You do get an upper diaphragm joint. That's whatever. Barely any movement out of that. Just more bobblehead articulation there. So no real movement out of that. But when you combine it with the lower, a little bit better. The jacket pieces are on a ball swivel, no surprise there. I think just a regular ball joint would have been better. With ball swivels, that's where the chance of breakages come, because where you think it's going to swivel one way, it's actually 90 degrees off in some other direction, and then done. If you're unlucky and it's a crappy joint, it might just snap. Ball joints are the way to go when you're dealing with stuff like this, I think. Okay, legs can't even go out straight. They just kind of slide off like that because of this massive diaper piece. Unacceptable. So his legs can't even, they're really bricked up. Okay, so they just automatically kind of go at an oblique angle like that. Knees, that's it. That's all you're going to get out of the knees. That's the most you could bend a knee on a Medicos figure, because they didn't even think about making that boot just not get kind of like digged into the thigh there. Like that's why it's just, you can't, because the shoes are just huge. So very little planning went into this figure, and you could tell. Okay, and if you're interested, let's see. No real, that's it. It's just such a bricked up, tight figure. Like he's not going to move. Like that's it. I'm trying to see how far you could split. That's the most you're going to get. If you push it any worse than that, it's probably going to break. You do get a thigh swivel, which is nice. So very disappointing articulation. Ankles, and okay, if you thought that was bad, there's more. That's it. Like there's no forward movement on his ankles because, again, no planning. That just gets stuck. That's it. That's all you're going to get. Toe joint is whatever. It's there. And very crappy ankle rocker. Like this one's just so jammed, it's you can't even move it. So a next to useless ankle rocker because it's so tight. And it's just cut off by his kind of like upper shoe here, like this kind of calf piece. So very bricked up ankles, bricked up knees. This guy just can't move too good at all. He does like doing that. The knees are buttery smooth, and they just like to kind of fall down on itself like that. So, okay. Very unpleasant to deal with. It's a shame because he's such a important character. They really didn't give a shit about him. Okay, and like I said, why am I having so much trouble making him stand? Because they always do this with the feet on Medicos. They put like a curve in there, and that's a nightmare to make him stand, especially when the ankles just don't have any movement. So he really can't stand. Like he just can't. You really need the kind of like stand that he comes with And yeah, you could finagle him, but like it should not be this difficult to get him to stand. If you saw like the other figures I was looking at previous to us, like that Rosato, she has freaking like 20-inch high heels, and she stands 10 times better than this guy because they put more effort into it and actually thought this stuff through. So Medicos is an old company, and they've been around since before I even started collecting these figures. So the fact that they didn't innovate anything and actually went backwards from some Medicos I own, like Cars, Jonathan, Dio, things like that. This is a very kind of like disappointing figure, I think. You can get him to stand after like really fooling around with him, but it's like a chore. So be aware of that. And you know, if you really like Dio, not Dio, if you like Speedwagon as much as I do, you're still going to get this figure, but just be aware. So articulation on this guy and overall quality, for that matter, gets a 2.5. This thing just snapping off his hat really just bummed me out. Like, that's just crap. That is just shit. That just broke off like 2-week-old like Halloween candy. Like, it just like came apart, like powdered dust. Like, you could just see like the residue in there. That is just shit. Wow. Okay. But anyway, yeah, whatever. Just stay like that. So articulation 2.5, overall quality, what a piece of shit. So I mean, you could tell I'm angry. I think I have a right to be. Let's talk about his accessories. Okay, so he does come with a kind of cool looking gun. Nice old fashioned revolver that he uses in the show. Okay, so you get that. And let's look at everything else he comes with all at once. So he does come with this kind of like shocked face. I think that looks good. Okay, so you do get that kind of alternate head. Now, you do get a stand. Okay, so you get all the pieces that come with that also. So you get that nice stand. It's a nice stand. Medicos stands are pretty nice. Now, what you do get that is kind of interesting is kind of like these hat pieces here. And this is just to make it kind of have that effect of him throwing his hat. If you notice, they're all like differing sizes. And how does that work? So they gave you an attachment, this one right here. And you basically just plug the hat pieces inside. And you just match them up by size. Okay, so you just plug them in like this. And it kind of gives you that effect. And if you watch the anime, you'd know what scene I'm talking about. Just like when he's fooling around with his hat. When he's going to slice Jonathan up right finally with the tip of the hat. That's for that. And it gets its own stand also. It's essentially like, you could finagle this however you want, but yeah, it comes with its own stand, and it just kind of plugs in here like this. Yeah, something like that, yeah. But, and you could just set that up however you want, so. Pretty cool. No complaints there. So I think his accessories are pretty good, and let's just look at his hands. You do get 2 open hands. Okay. You do get a pair of pointing hands. Oh, actually, this is just one. Kind of like gesturing hand with like 2 fingers out. That's very dynamic. I like that. You do get kind of like a kind of flat fingered hand, kind of all bunched up together. You do get a pair of fists. One is already on him. And you do get a kind of alternate gun holding hand. The other one's already on him too. So if you want to hold the other hand. And you do get a pointing hand. Okay, so accessories, as far as I'm concerned, they get a 5 out of 5. No real complaints there. Now, let's talk about this guy. Very disappointing figure, honestly. It's just such a shame. Because I was actually excited for this release. And because Speedwagon is just one of my favorite characters, just like how important he is to the show and how he keeps reappearing and things like that. So, overall value, I'd say he gets, and I'm going to give him a 3.5, only because it's still like it's going to be a must-have figure for people who are like fans of this character, but he has so many issues that I can't give him a 4-star rating, and he's got some serious QC issues, and I hope yours doesn't kind of snap at the plume like that, because that's a real bummer. And I feel like the rest of them are probably equally weak, so be very careful touching those. They really didn't give a shit when they've made those. They shouldn't be that kind of like weak. Like I said, he's a bitch to just deal with. Just very frustrating in general. So 3.5. His aesthetic not ideal for me. Like I still want the anime Speedwagon. 4.2 articulation, engineering, overall just complete and utter shit. He gets a 2.5 for that. Very poor choices with the articulation. Very kind of really cheap quality control, where you have domestic $20, $30 figures just blowing this out of the water. Accessories 5 out of 5, no complaints there. So overall value 3.5. Like I said, he's $70, not the priciest, but I got him from Japan. If you get him from the US, he's going to be a lot more than that, and that gives him an overall rating of 3.54. Not the best figure to kind of like deal with. So there you have it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want to see more.